tonight, I am really pleased that we're going to be hearing from another remarkable family, the Hershend family. They're not perfect. Some of you heard them 8 years ago when Chris was here. He was warmly received. And this time I said, Chris, would you come back and maybe bring someone in the next generation? Maybe a first-round draft pick. Now, what's a first-round draft pick? Some of you know this, right? It's a spouse. We don't call you guys in-laws or ex-laws. You're a first-round draft pick. So Paige, you can come on up a while, Chris and Paige. Paige is, see if I get this right, Paige is Chris's cousin's oldest son's wife. I got it right, yeah, okay.
Or how would I be related? So say it backwards, say it the other way. Instead of Chris's cousin. So Patrick's.
Husband's father's cousin.
Are you on?
I'm on. There we go. My husband's father's cousin.
Yes.
Yes.
That's us.
And we're still trying to figure out what that makes us, but.
So we're glad they're here. They're going to be talking a lot about their vision and how that's coming to reality, what they've been doing, leading with love. They are the largest family entertainment company, I think, in the nation. And I'm going to save the rest for you guys to share. All right, so Chris and Paige, glad you're here. Take it away.
You gonna drive the slides?
Okay, I'll run the slides. So Paige and I have not practiced together, so this is really going to be exciting.
Yes.
And has everybody had dessert, or is that coming later? No, that comes later, right? Okay, that's right. Okay, so we are going to break. We're going to talk for a minute, and we got a break. And when you see a slide that looks, well, you'll see it. That's your signal to get up. Okay, so yeah, see, look forward to it. And that's when dessert comes out.
He's got you covered.
All right, and also, if you need to get up before then, it doesn't offend me or Paige, please just do your thing. So yeah, we wanted to share our story today, and so like Sally said, Chris Hershend, I am G3 in our family, and our business, we'll talk about it in a second, and I serve as the chair of the board of our operating business, and I'm sort of the typical guy in every family's got one of me, right? So hopefully I'm not referring to the jerk in the family, I'm referring to the business guy, okay? So how would you describe yourself?
I mean, I'm Paige. I'm G4, married in or draft pick, as it were. I like that. We're going to start using that. And then my 9-year-old is the oldest of 10 G5.
That's true.
So we're just kind of getting that generation rolling. I'm a nurse practitioner. I don't work in the business. I'm involved in our philanthropy. I sit on the board for our philanthropy business. I've done family council in the past. I've done board observer in the past. So a lot of tangential involvement, but nothing direct.
Got it? Any questions? Okay, it's time for dessert. Thanks.
Strong work.
So, oh, 7:20. Wait a minute.
Oh my.
Oh, I can set a timer.
Oh, I'm sure she'll tell us.
No, I do love a good timer. All right, got it. Okay, so this is our agenda. Can everybody read that? Okay, good. Actually, I'm going to stop straddling this cord, so I'm going to move slightly over to the right. Does that give you, are you staring at the bright projector
No, you're
light?
fine. I was trying to see.
Okay, so I find that many family business presentations are dull because we tend to show a lot of black and white pictures of our grandparents, who we love, and talk a lot about our business, but it's totally unique. My business is totally different than yours, so I'm happy to tell you anything you want to know about our business, but I'm really going to focus on the stuff that we all share in common or might share in common, family side type things. So first, our family, okay? So definitely we all share this. I'm a brilliant slide layout editor, as you can see. A couple different family meeting shots, just a couple fun family shots. The top picture is from I think that was the Greenbrier, like maybe 15 years ago. This is last summer. Bottom right is our family meeting just a couple weeks ago in St. Louis. We had a 90th birthday party, and it was a rager. It was awesome. Then some, so we kind of look like the rest of you. I will say this, and I think you all know this. so there are 62 or 63 family members as we define it in our family. We're as diverse in that 62 or 63, with the exception of ethnicity, for obvious reasons, but we're as diverse as any random group of 63 people. I mean, probably not truly random, but our company is known, as one example, our company is known for a Christian orientation, Christian mission, vision, well, not explicitly Christian in the mission, but ethos that kind of permeates the company. And it might be fun to unpack, like, how does that work with a diverse owner group, not all of whom are Christians or even really like it. And it's, right? I mean, that's reality. And so that's something that we've worked through, more or less. We're always working through it. But so I guess I just want you to see this. Again, this is one of those things you always see in pictures, happy families posing. But this is one of the things I'm most proud of in our family, is that we do enjoy being together. We don't live near each other. So it's a joyful thing that we've really cultivated now over, I guess, 23 years.
Yeah, and cultivated being the key, because even when I joined the family 17 years ago.
You should know that.
I should know that.
Yeah.
It was 05, so 17 years ago.
May of 05.
No, we got married in 07.
Dang.
He brought me to the meeting in 05.
I went to the wedding.
It was not as enjoyable 17 years ago as it is now, and it was a lot of conscious, intentional work with outside help at times in mentors and counselors and advisors to get to the point where we can all hang out at the beach and have a good time, which is a blessing.
Two family branches, essentially. This is something you see in every family business presentation, am I right? Two family branches. My side on your right, Paige's side, Jack is the sort of the paterfamilias on that side. So 8 people in my generation, and then you can just see we've been productive for the most part. I did do one animation tonight. See if you can spot it. Huh? See, I'll do it again. Ready? My brother just had a baby. He is still producing G4.
Yes.
So Paige is down on G5. They got 10 of those. We're still producing G4. So I think this is pretty common as families get older. Did you have a question? Okay, I was hopefully not about production of G4. Thank you. And we keep this up to date. My assistant, one of her key responsibilities, I don't know, that sounds really too dramatic. We have a whiteboard in our office, and you have to use a whiteboard for this because people are having babies. Some people die. I mean, you got to kind of, and so we've got it split up, lineal, draft picks, men, women, and then by generation. And I refer to it all the time. I literally walk in out of my office to check the latest whiteboard numbers to see what do we got. That's probably not that important, but it's something that I do. So this is what we do. So our recipe, if there's a single recipe for what we do, it's really simple. It's just to gather. And that's not a secret, but it's super critical. You can't trust somebody you don't know. You certainly can't love somebody you don't know or trust. And so you just have to, there's no substitute for eye contact, hanging out at the pool, drinking a beer. And we spend a lot of time and energy on this, and it's increased over the years. So,
Yeah.
And you've been a part of that, pretty close to all of that.
Yeah. Well, and again, back to the family tree. I mean, I think the fact that we are having G4, we've also got a bunch of G5, and they're all getting raised together is kind of blurring those generational lines. It's blurring the branch lines, and it's going to be really positive for the family moving forward. It's going to relieve a lot of historical tension points amongst different branches of the family, just by allowing the kids to get together and play. And they don't know we're having a meeting. They don't
It's
care
magic.
that we're having a meeting.
It's totally magic.
They run around like tiny little psychos, and they love it because they're with their cousins. But it's setting that stage for them to then be able to work with each other with those memories on board without any animosity or any stress, hopefully.
I don't think, and we'll talk about our business in a second, I don't think we would be considered a family first business. I think we'd be business first in the business. But I treat this in a way like a business. And if you think about it, I have a friend, actually, she lives here in Philadelphia, who refers to it a little bit like a trade association. I mean, it's like, yes, they're your family, but they're also opting in to your system, and you want to make it in many ways. I mean, even if they're employed, now none of our family are employed in our business, which is worth talking about. Maybe we explore that. But the opt-in, the choice to come, the choice to engage in a meeting, and there's frustration, with, equal division of responsibilities on making these family meetings go well, and I do all the work, and nobody else ever helps, and there's that kind of stuff, and so over time we've said, well, that could fracture this. That resentment and bitterness could fracture this, so we staff for that. So we just started. That's why we started staffing. We always had the advisor mat, and we always had somebody who wasn't named Hershend in the room. Anytime we got together, it just was important for us for a lot of reasons. It just made the evenings or the times go a little better when things did get tense, all that kind of stuff. And so this is now compounding. And I know you know this, so I don't know, just wave me off if this is too simple of a point. But so we started doing this in '98. So whatever that is, 24 years. So you cannot, you can buy a company, right? You could buy your EBITDA of whatever level, assuming you get the financing and everything, tomorrow. You cannot buy the benefits of compounding 24 years of family meetings like this. You can't replace it. And if it stops, it stops. And picking it back up again could be not only difficult, but not that gratifying, because you've lost that rhythm. And so if I was going to commend one thing to you, just it would be to invest in this and to build a plan to make sure you gather. Okay, so that would be the only, if you don't remember anything else. We do it in a lot of different ways. Over the years, we've iterated, and now we do men's, women's retreats. We talked about doing a married-in retreat.
Yeah.
I think that would be weird.
I think it would be weird too.
Yeah.
But we're doing some other married-in stuff that's less weird, that's helpful, like a married-in orientation. Because
Yeah, like sending my wife and somebody else's husband away just feels weird. So
yeah.
I don't love that one. But that example aside, we've been willing to innovate on kind of
Yes.
everything else.
The teen camps have happened in the past where we've had the teenagers come out to some of the park properties and do a little day camp and explore what does the business look like from the inside, here bond with your cousins, but also get a sense of what the business is doing day to day. Hopefully you'll get a love for it. I think that was a hit with your kids when they were
that
younger.
was awesome.
My kids, I think, are starting to get to the age where it would be valuable.
They didn't love it when we made them sit on the wood floor of a cabin in their full costumes in the heat of the summer and listen to a speech from their grandparents for a video.
Shock.
Oh, it was brutal. I'm still hearing about that 10 years later. OpCo here just refers to operating company. So I'll talk about our structure here in a minute. But one of the things we've done to help foster an understanding of our operating business is invited shareholders in pretty frequently to board level interaction. Almost no management level interaction, but a lot of board level interaction relative to, I think, the norm. Those feel more like business dinners that they're invited to. But we also do kind of family dinners that the board and management are invited to, and those have a very different feel, I would say. There's a lot of flip-flops, kids running around, cornhole, I mean, you name it. So we try to mix it up. And what we find, too, we have an investment business. We'll bring, for example, our investment managers or analysts in. It's a third-party firm, and they'll come in. And, these guys work with hospital boards and foundation endowments. I mean, they're investment guys, and it's a pretty dry world for them. And then they come to our, investment committee meeting, and we all go out to dinner. We were in Denver last October, and we're like, let's just throw them all in one room. So we had, the investment guys, we had the family council, and we had our giving board.
Oh, and then we had cowboy shirts with it.
And then we went,
so
we walked to dinner, and we stopped
shopping.
in at a ranchwear shop on the way that was like 300-year-old family-owned business. And we gave everybody a gift certificate to buy a shirt with pearl snaps. So that was
Stylish.
Yeah.
But the board got in on it too.
Everybody got in on it. It was
The
fun.
chairman of the board wore it to the next board meeting.
Well, that's me.
Dinner.
You're
No,
talking about
sorry,
the
the CEO, not the chairman.
So, okay, you get the idea.
Yeah.
Okay, this is what our business is, all right? We really do three things. Hershend Family Entertainment is our operating business and the 70-year-old one. The neighbor company is our giving business, relatively new, the newest of the group. No, not the newest.
It's older than Elmwood.
And Elmwood's the name of our family office. Okay, so think of them like, from left to right, think about it, operating, giving, investing. Okay? So Hershend, so 1950, we have not had a family member in a serious management role at Hershend, in a line management role, really since 1991. So we're on our fourth CEO since that time, maybe fifth. And this is not an indictment of our family so much as just when the time came, and my uncle, Paige's grandfather-in-law,
Correct.
yeah, I just got to make sure I get that right. He's an outstanding leader. And he did a bunch of things that were very humble and aggressive and progressive and unlike anybody else that you would meet. You can get a sense of that from this fiduciary board. But I mean, he stepped away from day-to-day management of the business in the prime of his career, in his 50s, because he wanted it to stay. We say family held forever. We say we want to be family held forever. Doesn't mean we're going to own this park or that business or whatever forever. It just means we want to be in business together as a family forever. And so by stepping back, he gave us, we had to hire somebody. I mean, we had to have a leader step up. First leader did pretty well. Second leader, was there for 6 minutes. Third leader was amazing, 15 years. Left us to go run SeaWorld briefly. And then since then, we've had a CEO since 2015, Andrew Wexler, who's phenomenal. Yeah. And I think one of the things I would say on that, and I won't belabor this because I know a lot of you do not have outside CEOs, so this is not a better than or preference so much as the probability as you get older and further along that the talent you need to run your business is coming from, this size pool is just lower than the entire rest of the world, right? If you can recruit from the other 7 billion people, your probability is higher than if you can recruit only from, the 50 or 60 of us. Obviously, there are lots of, I'm thinking of Brian Roberts across the street. There are lots of big companies with effective family business leaders, so don't take that as an indictment. But we've been successful. 8% EBITDA CAGR in our business is great. We're thrilled with that. Our target in our family is 6. So 8, we're like, woo! And we had a great year last year. And I don't think I explained what we do in the business. So we are in the theme park and water park and attractions business, primarily theme parks and water parks. Anything you would do with your family where you'd pay to do it. So not like a national park. Those are free. We don't want to be in that business. And this business has been, it's fun to own, right? It's kind of fun to own a theme park business.
It's definitely fun.
Yeah, so we got
Kids
roller
love it.
coasters and sharks and stuff, so it's cool. That, I don't want to be naive about, that doesn't hurt when we talk about family held forever. The nature of our asset is cool, but I've talked to a lot of you tonight. I've talked to a lot of people all over the world who are family business owners. It is irrelevant. It's irrelevant. So please don't fall into the trap of thinking, well, of course, because they own roller coasters. I don't buy that. And so we've had a great, this is kind of how we think about it. Own it, but hire the best to run it. Again, not an indictment of a different approach. Did I leave anything out about the business?
I think you covered the high points.
Is it boring yet?
A little bit.
Okay. Okay, and this is another slide on our business. So we have a cultural touchstone we call Lead with Love. We only have 3 stockholder objectives, essentially a cultural objective, a employee objective, and a growth objective. So we don't, at the stockholder level, for example, have a safety objective. We don't have a guest objective, right? Those are really important, but not necessarily where the stockholders were most passionate. So, and we call our cultural objective Lead with Love. And I put the word agape in there because that's how we train it inside the company. We basically just explain to people that it's a verb, it's not a feeling, it's not romantic love. That does happen at work sometimes, but it's usually inappropriate, so we don't talk about that. But the way you choose to forgive somebody who's wronged you, the way you correct somebody gently when they've screwed up, the way you admit when you've screwed up, all those kinds of things. So those are all, and we've got a whole bunch of stuff on this that is really cool. And lived by my uncle, but it wasn't ever written down by my uncle, right? He was just good at it. I mean, this is the kind of guy people would lay down in the middle of the interstate for my uncle. He's just incredible. He's like a Sam Walton meets Herb Kelleher meets, I don't know, he's just phenomenal and humble and quiet and would never write anything down. So the guys who came behind him did a better job of sort of making our culture grow because they were intentional about building systems around it that we could coach and measure and train to. So another pushback I hear about outside CEOs is they'll never be as good as a family member because they didn't grow up in the business. They don't understand it like I do. Our culture on every metric we have has improved. And it's not because our leaders are charismatic and amazing. It's partly because they're good leaders, but also partly because they're committed to building a system that any knucklehead could come in and make happen. So anyway, is that fair or did I overdo it?
No, I think Andrew and Joel before him really embraced the culture, made it their own, and then inspired the rest of the employees along those lines in a way that sometimes feels more genuine almost than coming from a family member.
It can. I think that's right, because they're choosing it. They're opting in. I don't know. I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think, again, family business, we drink our own Kool-Aid, so she's my truth check. This is just a couple things, just to give you a sense of what the culture feels like. So we just announced this a few weeks ago. We do this tuition thing. It's actually a third party that we use called Guild Education. They do it for Disney and a bunch of other firms, and we got ridiculous positive feedback on this from our employees and from the press and everything. And we do business with Dolly Parton in Tennessee, and people started saying, well, Dolly's giving everybody free tuition. I was like, that's me. But no, I mean, seriously, Dolly puts wind in our sails. Nobody writes stories about people like me, right? So Dolly gets a fair share of attention. So that's been cool and meaningful, but it's really just one way we're trying to tell our people we love you. That's all. And we're trying to help them. I mean, we got a lot of seasonal jobs. We've struggled with, as a family, are we morally, this is kind of a good problem to have. Like, we got so many people working for us. Are we doing right by the people, like a working mom who is working a seasonal job selling popcorn and then is out of work for 4 months? Like, just honestly, like,
what can we do to make it better for her?
And then you can't discriminate. So if you're doing it for her, you're doing it for everybody in that way. So we came up with a thing called Share It Forward. We can talk about that, or you can Google it. Hershend Share It Forward, which is basically a public charity that we use to invest in our employees. They invest in each other. It's not controlled by Paige or me or the company, but it is managed by the company, and we basically have a way to kind of rifle shot financial assistance. That's just one example. We take money out of the business every year and give it away. Again, not unusual. 1% may sound like a small number to you, but it's a big number to us. It was about 4 times what we were doing before we put that goal in place. And we thought we were pretty generous before. And I think in a corporate social responsibility sense we were, but that was a big move, and the shareholders drove that. That didn't come from management. That came from all of us saying we really want to do this. So that easily exceeds what we pay out in dividends. And this last number, I'm so proud of that. I think it's so cool. So we measure our employee, same thing everybody does. We ask them all these questions. And in this metric, this is just awesome. So engagement is basically, I know what's expected of me at work. I have the tools I need to do my job. My supervisor cares about me personally. I'm able to use my gifts and talents at work. Those kind of questions. Gallup came up with that. They have a 12-question tool that anybody can use. Good?
I would highlight that of the 1% donated to nonprofits, a portion of that goes to the management teams where they can choose where to donate that money. So we're not directing all of that.
Actually, the majority.
The majority goes back to the leaders of the groups, of the parks, of the aquariums, and they get to choose what nonprofits they're passionate about and where to direct that money, which again goes back to the engagement and the culture of love and making them feel like what I'm doing is worthwhile. So I think that
it would feel
initiative is
weird to
really
have them. I mean, they get compensation, market comp, bonus, long-term incentive, all those things. But there's a form of compensation here too. Like if you get to direct giving dollars in your community, it can be really meaningful. So I assume most of you are doing this, and I would challenge you to go look at what 1% would be like. There's this thing called 1% for the planet, where we stole this idea. I mean, it's like, I don't know if you've seen it, like Patagonia and Ben & Jerry's and all these cool. I was like, well, if they can do it for the planet, we can do it for people. That's supposed to be funny. Anyway, so that's kind of what we do. And that spun out a fair amount of work on the family side, because the difference between what the management team was already doing and the 1% is controlled by the family. So we get together and have a mechanism for giving that away. Okay. Investment business, really boring, not at all interesting, but pretty important for us. Basically, we were concerned about concentration risk. We were also concerned about a lack of sophistication. Just most people aren't kind of into investing or good at it, or they may think they are and they're not. So we struggled for about a decade with this kind of paternalistic, like, I'll take care of you with your dividends, I'll manage them for you because you're not bright enough. And I didn't say it like that, but I mean, honestly, I built a partnership agreement that locked up the money so nobody could touch it and we could make it grow for them. And one of the most painful learning lessons for me was when, I had to kind of admit that I had almost broken the family while I was trying to protect them. I thought I was trying to protect them. I probably just had a control bias. But so we unlocked this partnership, and there was a little bit of diversification, a little bit of redemption, but it basically stopped after a little wave. And then we've gone like a decade now, and really there's been no material exits because we've taken down all the gates. We've said, you don't have to stay in this. I hit the cord, I was a little worried. You don't have to stay in. And once we dropped the gates, the buy-in increased multiple times over. Yeah. And I don't know if there's some sort of weird, perverse motivation there, but I think that's the way people work.
No,
Do you remember any of that?
Oh yeah, drama, lots of drama. That's when I joined the family. There was lots of tension.
Yeah.
And I think there was a lot of suspicion, a lot of discomfort,
Both ways.
Both ways. But since I'm on the other side, I see it mostly from the other side. Is he doing this from the right motivations? Are people treating me like a child? I can manage my own money. Why do we have to be tied together? It just created a lot of friction and a lot of resentment within the family. Whereas now I think it's the opposite. It's very open, it's opt-in. All the financials are transparent. We get a lot of updates, sometimes too many for those of us that are not financially inclined.
It's pretty nerdy.
It's pretty nerdy, but you don't feel like anyone's hiding anything from you. So I think that's diffused a lot of that tension. And now people see, oh, this is a great way to diversify, to get access to certain investing tools that I wouldn't have on my own, to stay involved with the family in another way since, again, we're not involved in the operating business. So this is another way to keep the family together for the benefit of everyone, ideally.
It's been cool.
It has. It's
That
worked
was
really well.
but it was almost the cool thing that killed us, because relatively small economics relative to the operating business, but psychologically really important and financially important. I mean, how do you build an investment policy statement that serves 85-year-olds and 5-year-olds, and so I'm happy to talk about that later. But again, very dull. Okay, giving, not dull, super cool. So what we do is we keep it really simple. Tzedakah is like this old Hebrew word. I think I probably even misspelled it, and if anybody here can correct me, please do. But basically, there's this Old Testament principle in the Bible where it says basically when you glean your field, don't take it all. You leave some behind, and the idea is that the sojourner and poor people can feed themselves off of your unneeded excess. So we don't try to maximize profit. I mean, the basic thinking is we need to grow more than we need to have a profit target or a certain number. And so if you stacked us up against Six Flags or our peers, we'd have lower margins because we're putting some of that operating expense in the business where it's obviously tax efficient and strategic. But that's not, so I don't want you to think we're giving away money and we're patting ourselves on the back as generous, because there's a lot of ways to be generous, but giving away money has been a really tangible thing. And in a way, I think about the business now as a giving engine. it's still feeding the family, right? I mean, it's still economically lucrative, but it motivates us, I think, more to know that as we grow the business and that 1%, right, that floats. In 2020, we gave nothing away. But what's interesting is in 2020, the family members wrote checks out of their own pocket into that employee charity I was talking about. When we thought, before we knew the government was going to do it for us, they did a really good job of putting money in everybody's pocket. We were trying to do that in like April, and it was really cool though, because we said immediately, guys, we can't do dividends, we can't do interest payments, we can't do any shareholder payments until we get through this, and we can't do any giving. And we tell people that. We're like, hey, we don't know what tomorrow brings, but we'd love to be generous today with what we've got in our hands today. So, pretty cool. And the dividend is probably the other cool thing on here. You want to explain that?
Yeah, so in addition to coming together as a group, so the neighbor company has a board. We as a board sit down and review proposals submitted by the family to charities, and they have to align with our policy statement that we created, about 6 years ago?
Could be.
And then that's where the bulk of the money is donated out of. But we also have what we call the dividend, where each household is just given a chunk of cash into a donor advised fund. It gets pulled back at the end of the year if you don't use it. So you use it or you lose it, but it gives
You give it away or I will.
every family unit within the family the opportunity to say, look, I didn't want to bring this to the larger group, or this was too small of a donation, or I don't think it's appropriate for the family to donate at these levels, but I really feel passionate about this charity in my community. Here's X amount of dollars.
And yes, somebody related to you will give money away to something that offends you.
Yep.
And you got to suck it up. It's the big picture, right? Hey, bend, don't break. Like, let them give to, crazy whatever. Fine. My hard work produced, this is so offensive to me. And they say the same thing about you. Except you have more power and control in your family system, so you tend to flush that. So this was a way to kind of inoculate me, frankly, against the same problem I learned from in the other example, which was like, I got this. I know the right ministry. I know who's really good at that. Oh, you want to do justice and sex trafficking? I got the guy. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's stupid. What do I know? So anyway, we distribute. So we've actually learned a lot from those giving decisions. We don't see them, but people share and talk about it. So that's cool. And the donor advised fund is just easy. It also protects our operating business because there's a layer of protection. So if I'm giving to something that my customers would hate or my employees would hate, well, they don't know.
Right.
That sounds pretty cynical, though, doesn't it, to say it like that?
Well,
there's probably a more enlightened way to say that.
it protects the family from each other too, because that way if I'm giving to something that you vehemently disagree with, you don't have to know about it.
Ooh, this is your part.
Ooh, this is my part.
And then we're doing great, Sally, I think, because we're coming right into dessert.
Will you go to the next slide? I think I wrote down my notes on the next one.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. So.
And you get 2 slides.
I do. Awesome. Coming into the family as a married in or a draft pick, as it were, is completely overwhelming. I had been dating my husband about 6 months, and he said, hey, I want you to come meet some of my family. That was it. That was all I got. And he brought me to a family meeting with 45 of his relatives.
Oh, and you were George Washington?
George Washington.
At the time,
yeah.
So, and then you flew back to where for that meeting?
I think it was Greenbrier.
Okay, well, that's not bad.
I think we drove.
That's a decent first meeting.
Yeah. But you walk into this situation, you're like, holy cow, here's an entire room full of people I've never met. I'm sure they're judging me. And now they're speaking in a foreign language that I don't understand. Because when you come into the family business from outside, you don't know what things like EBITDA mean. You've never been exposed to that culture, so you're sitting there just completely mystified. And so one of the things that we've developed over the years is kind of an onboarding process for both teenagers who are getting old enough to attend the meetings and spouses who are marrying into the family. And some of it is really simple, a glossary. We literally have a list of commonly used terms, and we're like, here's what EBITDA means. Here's what OPEX means. Here are things that you're going to hear in the meeting that you've probably never heard in your life. We also do a mentoring system for the younger kids. So each of them has an adult that they can text with questions. We sit down before and after the meeting and say, hey, was there anything you didn't understand? You can ask me now, you can text me, you can call me later, so that they're not sitting there for 3 days going, I've got no idea what's going on. So
they still do that.
I mean, yeah, they do. But compared to when I joined, I mean, it
Yeah.
took me years and literally Googling to figure out what people were talking about.
You Googled it?
I Googled EBITDA my first meeting.
Okay. Who doesn't know what EBITDA is? It's okay. You can come out. Earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Okay, it's cash flow. Okay. That was really great.
Yeah, good job there.
That was my
wasn't
favorite
awkward
part
at
so
all.
far, the group session.
Yeah. So what we've done over the last 15 years is try to codify some of that learning and develop a system to help people join the family, because at the end of the day, we want them to feel like a part of the family. We don't want it to feel like you're married and you can't participate. Oh, you're a child, you don't understand, it's not a big deal, don't worry about it. We want everyone.
We did have a fight about that, about married-ins in any kind of elected position. Some of us didn't like the idea. We thought, well, it ought to be for us. They can listen, they can be in the meeting, but they can't hold a position of leadership. And then we had this aha moment where we're like, well, if it's an elected position, if they don't have the support, they won't be in the position. It was sort of like a
Right.
duh moment, but it unlocked a lot of freedom, I think.
Yeah.
We were more relaxed once we realized it's still essentially a meritocracy, like any election could be. So that was a big deal. That was like in the early 2000s.
Yeah. I think some of that was me. I think some of that was my fault. Because I started talking right away at the meeting, because I have no problem sharing my opinion. And I think there was some pushback initially, like, who is this girl that just showed up and started talking at the meeting?
We've seen worse.
Fortunately.
Yeah.
So the goal was to get from there to a point where, yes, it's awkward to talk about onboarding someone into the family, but the realities of family business are you need that foundational knowledge and that introduction in order to succeed as a family member, regardless of whether you're involved in the business. We've touched on it a couple times. When I joined the family, there was a lot of competition. There was not a lot of great communication. There was a distinct split between the two branches of the government. So he kind of showed that the government,
I heard it.
the family, it felt like government at
Don't
the
hit
time.
this cord.
I will not
We'll
hit that
black
cord.
out. You'll never get your dessert.
So his father and my grandfather-in-law, brothers, each had kind of their own families, their own children, and there was a lot of tension between those two branches of the family when I joined.
Mine was usually right.
You were older. Does that count?
Yeah, they were older, but we were righter.
Okay. Even down to at the family meetings, we'd have like family Olympics and just do silly stuff like Frisbee golf, and it got too competitive. And it was always this side and that side. And so that's where it comes back to the communication. It comes back to being able to trust the people in the family that everyone has your best interests at heart. And that's where I think the intermingling of G4 and G5 is going to be really beneficial for the future. And it's just luck of how the ages fell out. But I think moving forward, we're not going to see that anymore.
Yeah, it's way overlapping now.
Yeah.
Like we talked about, I got a brand new G4 and that's not an airplane, although that would be nice.
Who's technically a generation ahead of me.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Even though
yeah, my
they're
brand new
2
baby
days old.
niece is a generation ahead of Paige.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's like, you can't worry about that stuff or you're gonna go crazy.
So, is it this one?
I know you're not worried about it, but I sometimes do.
So one of the ways we really addressed kind of the lack of communication was through structure, and not business structure, but through governance for the family. So things like setting behavioral expectations at the family meetings and actually writing that down. We call it, the code of conduct? Is that what we call it?
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Code of conduct. Just mentally flag that.
Things like developing the investment statement for the charitable foundation allowed us to work through a lot of our differences in how do we choose where to give as a group. If we have a group over here who feels very strongly it should only be Christian ministries, and a group over here who feels that they don't want to support anything that's Christian, and how do we walk that line? And it's the more thoughtful our governance has been on the family side, the easier that has been to navigate. So it's super tedious. I remember slogging through meetings 15 years ago, fighting over 3 words.
Oh, and we used to do that we used to do that kind of work in our family assembly meeting. So the biggest meeting we would have, we'd argue about semicolons.
Yeah.
And we realized we were alienating entire generations of people who
Oh my God,
just
it was
didn't understand.
painful.
And so then basically it's just an argument for committees. In a business, in a family our size, you just got to do a lot of that work in committees. So you get the ugly out still, but it's in a smaller working group that's learned to trust.
But now having that written down where everyone can point to it and say, here are the expectations when you're in this role. Here's how we define family so that you know you're part of it. You know, having all that as a reference has really helped with the trust, with the communication, with the interactions on a family level.
That's good.
Um,
It takes longer to do it that way because I could write all these myself and pretty good, but nobody reads them, and nobody would remember anything in them, and most people would be frustrated, right? Because like, I don't know, I didn't vote for that. So going this route is 15 years or whatever of just, it's more organic. You bump into stuff. I'm really good at the I told you so. I knew this was going to be a problem. Here we are. We didn't plan for this. But if I can just shut up in those moments and let it self-heal, there's enough will in the family system now and experience to where we get to a better solution than anything I would have drawn up. But family business nerds, we tend to take, and I'm referring to myself there, we tend to take like somebody else's document and say, that's a really good one, and I'll compare it to this, and I'll make the perfect document. And it doesn't matter what somebody else does. It's like totally irrelevant. It's just useless. It's interesting, and it might inspire you, and it might give you an idea, but you have to write your own stuff. You just have to. Who amen that?
Yep.
That's right.
Because it's the working through it that's the most beneficial. It's the discussions surrounding it and letting people feel like their voice was heard that really makes the difference.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. And then getting my generation more involved, I think, has been the other piece of that. Because when I came,
Totally.
We were mid-20s, I guess, when I got engaged to Patrick and started coming to the meetings, and it felt very much like we were being dictated to, because it was very much G3 had just kind of gotten the reins and was taking charge on some of these. But to us who were just out of college and starting our careers, it felt like you're treating me like I'm 16 again. We don't want to be told how everything is going to be.
And
We
Paige
want
has
to have
like
a
12
voice.
degrees. She shows up and she's like, oh my goodness.
I had one
What a
when I
train
joined
wreck.
the
Okay,
family.
one, but you went and got a bunch. So yeah, I think that's a big point. And to be, as a family, to not be too consumed with your own essential goodness, just realize Paige came from a really cool family, and there's a lot of interesting things that she could bring to us, and have a little humility about, yes, this is how we do it, and we're not changing everything because you showed up. We love you, we're glad you're here, but sorry. Something in that, somewhere in there.
Right.
But also then a tenderness and a willingness to kind of say, okay, well,
Yeah.
please just be at least a voice in the process. And then confidence grows, trust grows, and we've definitely had, I mentioned it in a joking way, we've definitely had family members, lineal and married in, who were, let's just say, not helpful in the process. Not only not helpful, but destructive, and maybe even intentionally destructive at times. So it's not like I'm naive that doesn't happen, and we've gone through it. But the risk of that is building a bunch of walls around it, your systems that protect you from it. But in doing that, right, you've walled off the good stuff too, right? You've killed your ability essentially to bring in. It's not a semi-permeable membrane. Your system remembers one reflexive action. I don't know this person. She could go away any day. I'm going to be with her husband forever, even if she's not. So, right? The cynical but we have not, when we've taken that approach, it's taken us backwards every time. Okay, working groups, bunch of terms, probably mean relatively little. I mean, family council, it can mean a lot of different things. Owners council, I'll tell you about that. Board of directors, so for like I mentioned earlier, we got an independent board for Hershend, fiduciary independent meeting. It's not board of advisors, they're like legally liable for the operations of the business. Neighbor company, different standard for that board, right? It's a giving board, there's not much liability associated with it, it's mostly wisdom and experience. So we've got some non-family members on there as well, but it's majority family. I think one of our key employees is actually on the board, which is a little unusual. And then we poached a really cool family member from a family that's a lot richer and a lot bigger than us, and we steal all her ideas. It's been pretty cool. She's relatively new. Elmwood board and investment committee, so family office, those are the boring investments. So we've got that board is. I mean, I was telling Mark earlier about our operating company board. I'll come back to that. But on the investment committee board, it's like we got somebody who ran a family office for another really big, successful family that you would all know, and he worked for them. And we've got somebody who himself is the really big, successful, rich guy who's a friend, right? So like a wealth owner, so he kind of thinks like we should be thinking or want to. And then we've got a woman who runs a big, couple $1 billion endowment for a university. So she's on the buy side. And these people, I get this question all the time. Where do you get these people? Like, how do you find them? You work for it. Like, you work it. You think about it, you pray about it, you network, you ask your friends, you read an article, you watch something, and you'd be shocked at who will call you back, right? You'd be shocked at the quality of person who'll be interested in helping you. So please don't assume that the best you can do is your golfing buddy who's really smart with, it's shocking. And that has been true since our operating company board was founded in the 70s. It's ridiculous. We were a cave tour operation in rural Missouri, and we had, there was a Philadelphian on our board right off the bat. He was in the oil and gas business. Somebody from Nashville, they were all operators, okay? So my uncle basically had a peer group right off the bat. And they came to meetings. I mean, they were helpful. So the board today for our operating business is mostly CEOs of other companies. As we've sought diversity on that board, ethnic and gender, we've had gender diversity for a long time, but we doubled down and really made an effort a few years ago. And I'm a slow learner, so it took stuff like Me Too for me to be like, gosh, this is really important. And it took George Floyd for me to be like, we have got to do better on this. We're not going to diversify our board if we stick within our own networks, because everybody in my network looks just like me, but better, but they look like me. So, and we're all trained to do that, right? We all want to go out and network with the friends we went to school with and the people that we know and our geographic comfort zone, and it's like, that's not going to diversify your board. So that's hard work, though. So my point is, you can get great people to serve on your board, and you can get different kinds of talent, but it's a focus. So when somebody says, what do you do as chairman, right? They know what a CEO does. What does a chairman do? I have a friend named Adam Farver, who's the chairman of Pella, which is the window people, and he says, if I'm doing my job really well, everybody kind of looks at me and says, what do you do again? But this is a big answer. Like, I spend a lot of time cultivating and thinking about potential directors and wooing. That's actually in, I think that's in StrengthsFinders.
Wooing.
Yeah, and I don't have any woo, so it's kind of funny that I have to do it for a living.
And a couple people asked, our board is majority independent. We only have 2 family members currently on our board.
7 out of 9 are not related or owners in any way. And one of them's the CEO. So we have 6 true independents. 2 from here in Philly. Just saying. Who knew? Do you call it Philly anymore, or is it Philadelphia?
Are you just old?
I'm just old.
Okay.
It's like when people call it Hotlanta. Don't do that. All right, so we talked a little bit on this. I was talking to Mark about this. We pay our directors. There's lots of surveys out there that say what directors cost. And they sort those surveys by revenue. There's a firm called, actually, again, here in Philadelphia, called the Lodestone Group. A friend named Bernie Tenenbaum passed. His son now runs it. I mean, they do. There's surveys for family business directors. One of our things, maybe you can speak to this, is we have found it really helpful, Neighbor, Elmwood, and Hershend, to kind of have a buddy system. And I think this is actually a pretty ancient principle. I think Native American tribal councils did this: a hereditary leader and an elected leader. So somebody who's there because he or she is, in the family, and somebody who's there because they're really good. That's worked really well for us too. And so, like, I'm the chair of our board, and our CEO, right, is the CEO. And we do that we follow that same pattern at Neighbor and Elmwood. Would you clarify that or say it differently?
So at Project Neighbor, we have a family member who shares the board, but then we also have an executive director who's an outside
That position's
hired
open if you're
position
interested.
that we're currently looking to fill.
Who are the HR people again? There was
And
somebody
they
here
kind
who's
of
like
team up.
recruiters. Anyway, it's a good team. It's an important team. Okay, family council, maybe speak to the family council.
Yeah. So family council conducts kind of the business of the family. So think of it as almost like a board for the family. So we have someone who oversees hospitality issues. So where are we going to get together next year? What are we going to eat? What hotel are we going to stay at? That's hospitality. There's one family member that drives it, and then they pull in other people as needed. We have the same for an education committee. So focusing on educating the young kids about the family and the business, focusing on educating us adults, whether it's financial literacy or emotional literacy or...
Education's probably the most important committee.
What is benchmarking? We had a whole very fun Olympic session on benchmarking. So family council is volunteer.
It was boring, but it was good.
It's done on a voluntary basis. Anyone in the family, draft pick, lineal descendant, anyone involved can step up and say, hey, I'd really like to help out with education this year. We vote on it every 2 years, and then the people on the council can reach out to anyone in the family if they're like, hey, I'm making a video about something. I know you're really into videography. Why don't you come help me out with this project? So it's another way to keep people involved and keep people working together within the family.
And I will say, in brutal candor, most of those volunteer, one of the most frustrating things that I deal with as a leader in the family is low quality, poor follow through, lack of skill, no self-awareness, lack of shame. You mail it in and you don't even say you're sorry. You don't do what you said you were going to do. I wind up having to do it because it's important. We got to do it. And there's, there's a little bit of a, what's that called in psychology, where you're actually enabling the behavior you detest. So codependence or something like that. Enabling. Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's frustrating. So I've heard some folks say that if you've got 5% of your family like doing the work, that's probably a really good number, right? Like, don't expect 50% of your family to all be, because not everybody's gifted on this stuff, not everybody's paying attention. I had a sister in tears at our last meeting, not openly, but after the meeting, and she was in tears, Sarah, because she felt like she wasn't contributing enough.
Oh.
Yeah, it was super sweet, but it's like, okay, where do you want to contribute? And so you can spend a lot of energy trying to find the spot where she can contribute. And we will, and we're committed to it, but it's also just like, that's not a great time to be like, well, the last project you did sucked.
Right. But that's also where pairing the
it's true.
non-family member is helpful, because we have a chair of the family council, but we also have an independent consultant.
That's a big deal.
And he's the one then that
I think you should say that twice.
So we have an outside the family person who can then come in and say, hey, that last project sucked, you're not holding your own. So that it's not coming from your cousin or your aunt.
Don't use that language with
Sorry.
Them. Say, it was really bad. I said, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That was subpar. That was suboptimal.
Yes. But having that pair between the family chair or the family council chair and the outside independent voice, again, helps maintain the family relationships through those awkward conversations. And it takes the load off kind of our historical
Huge
leaders.
deal. Yeah,
So that you're not always the bad guy.
And you don't want to be giving your sister persistently negative critical feedback.
Right.
It's really better if somebody else gives her persistently negative critical and all that emotion, all that frustration has to go somewhere. So this is a little bit where the Owners Council goes in. It's not primarily its purpose, but I found, so we use Google Workspace as our kind of enterprise, just for the family, not for the company. Just, we subscribe, and it's been great for almost a decade now. I don't know.
Wow.
One of the tools in there is just like Slack or other tools, but a confidential chat channel. And you can set up your chat channel, and it's just great because that just seems to be the way everybody wants to interact. We don't want to send an email, we don't want to send a memo, we can't get together a meeting, but we need to vent or we need to ask or whatever. And so like we'll use it. We have a chat channel just so we keep a tight feedback loop on kind of, we're trying to figure out like what feedback do we need to give this person. And we're not going to give it to them in every case. Most cases, we're going to ask our non-family consultants to do that with us or for us. Sometimes, like in a line operating job, this is probably not a viable solution because it's just a regular line accountability. But in a family system where it's like volunteerism, it's important to be gracious in giving that feedback. And so, but to be honest, and that often comes from somebody else. It just is. There's probably a better way to deal with that. So somebody can maybe help me explore that while we're up here. Okay, I get this question all the time. Like, how do you pay for all this? Like, we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on meetings and all this stuff. So, that's appropriate for our scale. I think one thing you can do is you can look at what you spend, honestly, look at what you spend on this stuff and compare it to the value of your organization. Please compare it to the value of your organization. And then throw that number forward 20 years if you're able to keep it together, right? So compound your growth over 20 years and put that same number now in perspective. It's crazy to me how little we'll spend on this stuff in the name of, right? I mean, saving money. Like we're wired, we want to, and it's virtuous. But you look at this like an investment. And if you turn it into just a party where, one family member gets to choose and it's like she gets to decorate or whatever, there's an indulgence factor that you need to guard against, I know. And we've wrestled with that. Like, are we going to places that are too nice or whatever? And we may have to change it in the future, but what we've kind of evolved to is we want to make our gatherings worth a family member in their 20s who's working. We want to make it worth a vacation day or 12. No, not 12. A couple, right? So we want to make it worth it. So we pay. It's amazing what millionaires will do for a $250 plane ticket. It's very funny, actually. I lost my temper at the last. No, I didn't lose my temper. I almost lost my temper over questions about, if we had some weather moving in, can we come to the meeting a day early? Will Elmwood reimburse? And I was like, it's like a $129 decision. And they're asking me, and these are millionaires. I'm like, yes, so. If this is a gating decision for you, yes. So anyway, I'm sharing that with you, and this probably read differently to you. Now, you came late because you had other stuff to the St. Louis meeting.
Yeah, we were a day late.
So you didn't bump into that, but
No.
I was literally I was like, what are we talking about? Okay, but so what we do, like mechanically now, literally our separate investment business invoices our operating business, and the board approves the payment, and the payment goes out to us. So it's not a dividend. We're careful to avoid that, and the taxable. It kind of depends on your tax structure and stuff. The best way to do this, I guess, the point is please look at your spend honestly relative to the value of your business. Okay, these are our key docs and agreements. Okay, what would you say you know the most about on this one? I mean, not to put you on the spot, but like, do any of these I think all these.
Yeah, the family guidelines. Probably.
Like this is where you've been
worked
super
on a lot of
involved.
those. Yeah.
Okay, you want to talk about it?
Sure. Thanks for putting me on the spot.
Well, I'll say that the top three are non-negotiable, and if you don't have them, you got to do that. Like maybe stop, maybe leave now and just go do it.
Definition of family was actually a big sticky one.
Now you got to move to your left so I don't kick
Okay,
that
sorry.
again.
Yeah. We actually wrote down and defined family and the different roles that you could have within the family. For example, are you an owner? What does that mean? Does that mean you own actual stock in the family? I don't. So technically, I'm not an owner. But am I still a family member? Yes, I am. How do we define that? Well, you're married to a lineal descendant. You were adopted by a lineal descendant. What if you weren't adopted, but you got remarried? So we actually hashed all that out and have a document on it so that people can look at it and see, look, I'm still part of the family even if I don't own stock. I'm part of the family if I want to be because my mom married this other guy. I don't even have to like him, but I could be part of the family. And then on that, we also have, what roles does that mean you can fulfill?
Yeah, or benefits you can receive.
Or benefits you can receive. You know, technically as someone who doesn't own stock, I can't vote stock. So if there is a vote
Which makes sense.
based on stock holdings, I'm out. And that makes total sense. If there's a vote within the family about where should we go for Christmas next year, as a family member, I can participate. But having that written out alleviated some stress and some misinformation that was going around. Again, it's all about the communication.
Yep.
And it comes back to having the governance and the documents in place are going to make that communication easier.
And again, having docs that you fought a little bit over.
Yeah. Same with family employment. We have a policy on family employment.
That
and
we've
what
broken.
Have we?
Yeah.
When?
Bradley.
He's employed by the company?
See?
I didn't know that. I thought he was employed by Jack.
Yeah. Well, through the foundation that the company controls. So I consider it breaking the policy.
Oh, see, sneaky. I didn't know that.
No bueno. Don't do that.
Don't break your own policies.
Don't
It's a
break
good
your own
lesson.
policies.
Unless you do it in secret and no one knows, I guess.
Significant, yeah. The shame. So obviously, I mean, we have all this stuff and sometimes we don't use it. Like, we don't follow it. One thing we follow carefully is this meeting code of conduct. We flagged that earlier. So like before every meeting, at every meeting, we link it in our agendas and we make everybody go around. It's the most pedantic, it's almost insulting, but we've done it for a while and it seems to work.
Yeah.
And it's basically like, here are our agreements in the meeting. You're not going to be on your phone. You're not going to interrupt. You're not going to blame or shame or fix. We have some, psycho kind of stuff like that. And that sounds pejorative. I just mean it's soft and hard rules, and everybody has to say I'm in. And we just some habits like that. A lot of cultures, a lot of companies will have, or cultures will have that. We have people who want to sell insurance back to the company because that's what they do for a living. They sell insurance, so why shouldn't the company buy from me? So we thought through, well, is there a tenure requirement in that role? Does it need to be a certain proportion of your overall book of business, for example? Stuff like that. So education reimbursement, we'll send people to conferences like this and they pay for their tuition and their ticket, but we'll reimburse 90% after the conference is over. And that gets you some nice trips. I used to require people to write notes to me about their experience, make sure they went to all the things. Yeah, people loved that.
I'm glad I missed that.
People were always so happy to share their thoughts with me. But yeah, stockholder agreement, objectives, and governance. The objectives, you've got a stockholder agreement by law, probably, I think, in most states, but it may not be pertinent to your business, but or member agreement or whatever. But the objectives were a big deal for us. We've had our 3 objectives now for over 20-something years, and we're going to refresh with a G4 kind of angle on those here in the next few years. It's the right time, but I don't expect they'll radically overhaul.
But again, I think it comes back to feeling like you have a voice in the conversation. Even if we don't change anything, to sit down and have the discussion and then feel like your thoughts were heard is what makes so much of the value.
That's a huge point. I think people want to be heard more than they want to be right or more than they want to carry the day, and I honestly believe that. I think the minority voice in your family will get ticked off way faster if they're silenced than if they're outvoted. Okay? And I've actually seen that multiple times. So in our family and others, it's just like if you just can let the ugly out. Like I said, committees are better than the whole, but even at the whole, let it out. It's way better out here than it is in here.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all we got. That's right. Yep. Okay, what do you got now, Sally?
Okay, this is so refreshing to hear all of the,
This is driving me crazy.
I love how you're talking about building family muscle, which is what we're so big on as well. So, questions that you have or comments, and wait for a mic, please, so we can all hear it.
Oh, I don't have to time myself on this one.
No, you don't.
Oh, actually, I should. Short answers. I'm ready.
So who has a question or a comment? If not, I do.
I think that went pretty well.
Okay, we got two. Carmen?
A question, great presentation. The one on shareholder governance, then you said shareholder for the objectives. If it's not too confidential, just can you give a couple examples of what that is? Is it metrics? Is it philosophy? How do you handle that? Thank you.
Yeah, the shareholder objectives are three. It's culture objective, employee objective, and growth objective. We measure culture by employee engagement, a couple specific questions of our employees. Do we walk the talk? Does ownership walk the talk? Does management? And are we generous? So it's imperfect. Employees, we measure employee engagement and a handful of other things that are similar to that. We talk about things like fill rates and job demand and apps per opening, but not too tactical because we don't really know what we're talking about. We're just not that close to the business. So, but just the idea of like, we want our jobs to be in demand, and we want the people who work for us to have sort of some objective measures of thriving. And so that's hard to measure. It's hard to measure. And then growth is the easiest. Growth, the financial objective is so easy. And it's just, we measure, you can do it a bunch of different ways, but we just use EBITDA growth, and we don't even express our debt limit there, which is a throttle on EBITDA growth, right? I mean, those two are correlated. You can fuel EBITDA growth by over-levering. And then we have a dividend target in there that but we talk about it, and we just, like, we haven't paid a dividend in 5 years for a couple different specific reasons, not because of COVID, but it was a strategic decision. But it's still in our objectives. So it's our plan to return to that. So that's it. We're a C Corp now because we thought we'd save, a few $1 million in taxes, and we did. But we may go back. We were an S forever. We may go back. You have to wait 5 years to go back. So we might do it. S is a lot more useful for estate planning. You can do a lot more with, notes and cool stuff.
Okay, another question?
So I'm Brendan Ryan with D&K Appliances.
What's your first name?
Brendan.
Hey, Brendan.
If you had to pick one thing that keeps you up at night when you think about the transition to the next generation, what would you kind of pinpoint?
I actually keep a list of what keeps me up at night. So
I mean, I am the generation being transitioned
you're the
to.
problem.
I am the problem, yeah.
What do you think about G5?
Oh, Lord, they're all tiny.
Little monsters.
They are tiny little monsters. I mean, I hope for our generation, so my 9-year-old being the oldest of 10, chances are they're not going to know our founders as well as the rest of us. And I hope that they still have the passion and the attachment to the business that the rest of us have, because I think a portion of that definitely comes from your dad and my grandfather-in-law, but I hope that it will outlast them. But that's what I wonder for my kids.
Yeah, I worry about being too satisfied with how things are today and not willing to break stuff and try it different. I think the biggest risk to most family businesses, that I think I've read this, that it's actually communication. And but I would personalize that by saying I'm probably the biggest threat to our family if I, stop messing with stuff and stop being willing to try or let somebody else step in. And so yeah, I think I'm the biggest. I think I keep me up at night. But I do have a list. It's very handy to keep a list when you wake up. Just be like, what is this? So.
Thanks for your presentation. I would love to hear a little bit more about your decision to not have the more family members working in the business, and what it would look like if future generations would like to work in the business. Is there discouragement against that, or encouragement one way or the other, or is it just?
How do you read that?
So I always read that as, we don't encourage it, and if you think you want to, you better be as or more prepared than the other candidates and have demonstrated your abilities outside the company before you try and come in. That was always the impression.
I think that's right, and I think that's exactly right. So we don't disallow it at all. But I don't know that we've done a good job of encouraging it either. And I was challenged on this by somebody they went one way for a long time like us, and then they came. They were trying to recapture the family's interest, and that was the way they were expressing it, was through working, and it wasn't working. It was hard. And so that's an example of the kind of policy. It's like, well, that's how we've done it for a few dozen years, but is that we can't attribute any certain success to a single policy. So that policy ought to be fair game to be turned over, and we say you don't get shares unless you work in the business. I'm making that up, but I mean that's pretty typical too. I would love that.
I think right now it tilts towards a little discouragement, not heavily.
Yeah, it feels discouraging
but
to people now.
It feels like you better be darn prepared if you think you want to do that.
Yeah, and many of us are super protective of the meritocracy inside the business, and we want our leadership team to feel like the sky's the limit, right? You can be the CEO of this business, and you can make a lot of money, and you can have a huge influence, and it's not because you're following my lead, it's because you're doing what God created you to do, and you're awesome at it, right? And so sometimes I worry about, like, I'm gonna flood the pipe with a bunch of family members, and there's gonna be a normal range of performance, and is that fair to the family or the company? So, yeah, but I think that can be a red herring, and people like me can build the wall, and then, it takes enormous family energy to change it, and I don't know that it should necessarily. So, great question. C-suite stays up at night.
So staying with that, with the family employment policy, do you have a certain amount of years that family members are expected or encouraged to work outside the business?
I think it might be 5.
5?
I think it might be 3. Paige thinks 5. So we'll go with 4. It's 4
sounds
years,
reasonable, yeah.
definitely. But we've got an exception, and so. But yeah, and we'll encourage people to come in and work in summer jobs and stuff like that, and we'll do internships. In fact, one of our coolest success stories is draft pick, not Paige, success, but who launched a career in I guess email marketing basically is what she's in. But she interned for us for 6 months, had no pertinent experience, but we were more than comfortable setting her up with an internship. And then she went out and got a regular job from somebody else, and she's awesome. I mean, she's super effective and a great high performer, and we feel an enormous amount of pride. I don't feel like that's a loss. I'm so proud to have had a little part in it. So pretty cool.
When you let me work with
the study.
the health advocate nurse for my dissertation and got me all my data.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Yeah.
So Paige is in academic mode at one point in her career, getting an advanced degree and needed to do a dissertation and wanted to use the company's information for a project. We don't do that. We do it for her, right? So Paige is worth the legwork, and so we got every. But I think it was like a boost. Now you could have done it on some other company, but maybe you wouldn't have had access to the same quality of information and all that. So. Pretty cool. That's usually the problem with research, isn't it? You can't really see behind the curtain.
Yeah.
So why not just open the kimono in our own business for her? Why not? And we learned something, and she learned something, and maybe all of you read her paper. Who knows?
Right.
So curious, do you open up shares to non-family? Like, do you open it up to spouses?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So spousal exemption, estate tax laws make it wise to make it possible. Most folks manage that through trusts, but yeah, for sure, we've definitely had spouses who own shares. and you can, you can deal with divorce and things like that in those transactions. And we've had some that did and some that didn't. So yeah, we've got, our definition of family includes a very tight definition and 2 ex-spouses who own some shares still.
Yeah,
And they're awesome.
they're awesome.
They're awesome.
One's my
So,
mother-in-law, I'm biased, but,
yeah, no, I
and,
mean,
and she comes to family meetings and participates, and,
alongside her ex-husband. It's weird.
I mean, the 2 of them are weird, but
They're
she's
weird
great with
people.
everyone else.
No.
I mean, everyone else is still welcoming to her and happy to see her, and,
Yeah, right. It's weird. Yeah, it's true.
You know.
It's a little odd between the 2 of them, but that's just family stuff.
right. And yeah, it wouldn't work the year after the divorce, but at this distance,
It
she's
used to be
just
very
another
distracting.
part of the family, which is kind of cool.
So yeah, not a clean interpretation of every single thing we've said, clearly. It's like there's mess on all sides of every slide we showed you.
Well, I love your adaptability. As you said earlier, sometimes we get too stuck. I mean, there's a balance between creating an agreement and then, changing. Things don't stay the same. So any other, do you have any other examples of when
It does wear me out, though. I'm
it
just
wears
like,
you
"Oh,
out?
We got to rebuild this. So it's exhausting. No, I mean, there's 100 examples. I mean, we break things and build them back all the time. Austin, what is Austin to you? Paige's husband's first cousin.
Yeah.
G4, he's kind of my wingman on all this stuff. G4, other branch of the family, so generational differences, family branch differences, totally different personalities. He's a great thought partner. He's definitely, he's willing to kind of challenge an assumption because he wasn't there when we wrote the first one.
Mm-hmm.
So, no pride of authorship.
Great. Another question from Rochelle Berge.
You had mentioned that there were no dividends the past 5 years. Has that made some shareholders want to sell shares, or
I
how
hope
do
so.
they get liquid? How do they get money if they want money if they're not getting dividends or wages?
We sent a metric ton of money out at the beginning of that period. Said, there you go, we won't be paying anymore for a few years because it was when we did our C Corp conversion. And so it was a big natural lumpy dividend. In general, though, I would favor low, steady dividends rather than irregular and lumpy. When we've done irregular and lumpy dividends, we tend to create, it's that enabling thing. I basically create a system where people feel like they're dependent on, not me, Chris, but me, the company, to send money out. And that's a little, it takes some of their dignity away, honestly, their autonomy. They don't know what to count on or plan for. I hear a lot of people say, the dividend can never go down, it's really destructive, and I understand why they would say that. My view is, if it's an organic business that has ebbs and flows and successes and failures, it ought to be fine if the dividend floats. You'd like to have a bogey that you hit, barring a disaster, but I don't know, I may have a different view on that. I just feel like my hope would be that each family member would have an income engine of their own through their own job, and that this is a springboard. A dividend is a springboard, not your main life source. But that's easy to say, and not often, and certainly nobody in the family wants me to tell them that they should go earn more money or that they should handle their money differently. Very few people of my siblings want my coaching on these things. That and parenting. I have all kinds of parenting advice for my siblings, but they don't take it or want it or...
Shock.
Yeah.
And Chris, how many kids do you have?
We have 4.
4 children,
Yeah.
8 range?
Well, my oldest is 22, a senior in college, and my youngest is a freshman in high school.
Okay.
So we're done almost. 2025, May of 2025.
Yes. Okay. Well,
Ally.
Chris and Paige, thank you so much. They are also